All right, today we're diving into a book that is, let's be honest, a modern classic. We're talking about Daniel Kahneman's masterpiece, Thinking Fast and Slow. We're going to look at its big, brilliant idea versus the hard evidence. Look, ever since this book came out back in 2011, it's been a total game changer. It basically gave all of us a whole new vocabulary to talk about, well, how we think. It completely changed the conversation about all the weird little glitches and quirks in our own minds. And its influence? Oh, it's everywhere. We're talking behavioral finance, we're talking intelligence analysis, even the design of the apps on your phone. It's become this essential toolkit for pretty much anyone trying to make smarter choices. So what's the big deal? What's the idea that got everyone so hooked? Well, at its core, the book gives us this incredibly simple but really profound way of looking at our own minds. Kahneman basically says we've got two different operating systems running in our heads. First, there's System 1. That's your gut reaction, your autopilot. It's fast, automatic, unconscious. It's how you just know that 2 plus 2 is 4. Then you've got System 2. Now that's the heavy lifter. It's slow, it's deliberate, and frankly, it's pretty lazy. It takes real effort to fire it up for tough problems. System 1 is always jumping in with quick answers, but man, it can get things wrong. Okay, let's put this to the test right now. You ready? A bat and a ball cost $1.10 total. The bat costs exactly $1 more than the ball. So how much does the ball cost? Just go with your gut. What's the very first number that popped in your head? Did you say 10 cents? Don't worry, most people do. That's your quick and dirty System 1 jumping the gun. But if you slow down and actually engage that lazy System 2, you realize, wait a second. If the ball is 5 cents and the bat is $1 more, that's $1.05. And together, that's $1.10. Boom. The answer is 5 cents. It's just a perfect little example of how our fast thinking can totally trip us up. So the ideas in the book are brilliant, right? So elegant. But here's the thing about science. It's always checking its own work, always correcting itself. And right around the time this book was absolutely blowing up, the whole field of psychology was, well, it was hitting a crisis. And that leads us to the big, kind of uncomfortable question we have to ask today. The model is amazing, but is the scientific evidence it was built on actually solid? You really have to understand the timing here, because the year 2011 was wild. You've got a huge scandal where a famous psychologist is caught totally faking his data. You've got a major scientific journal publishing a paper that seems to prove people are psychic, and right smack in the middle of all that chaos, Thinking Fast and Slow comes out. This was basically ground zero for what we now call the replication crisis in psychology. So all of a sudden, scientists are looking around and going, wait a minute, how much of this published research can we actually trust? So they started building new tools, new statistical ways to go back and really stress test all of that old research, including, you guessed it, the studies in Kahneman's book. Okay, so one of these tools is called the Replicability Index, or R-index for short. It's pretty straightforward. It's basically a score that tells you the odds that you could repeat an experiment and get the same result. The easiest way to think of it is like a grade. Anything below 50 is a fail. It means you've got less than a coin flip's chance of the finding being real. So, what happened when they ran the studies from the book through this R-index? Well, the results were all over the place. It's like a report card with some A-minuses and some straight-up Fs. Some chapters, like the one on optimism, held up great, got a high score. But others, the ones with some of the most famous, most fascinating ideas, they got failing grades. So what does that really mean for the book's main arguments? It kind of suggests that some of its most memorable, most talked about claims are maybe built on a foundation that's, well, a little bit shaky. And you can really see the contrast here. Chapter 4, that's the one about the mind-blowing idea of priming, that seeing a word can subtly change how you act later on. It got a score of just 19. 19. That is incredibly low. Compare that to the chapter on optimism, which scored a rock-solid 80. I mean, that's a massive, massive difference. Now, here's the thing. To his immense credit, Kahneman himself basically raised his hand and said, yeah, I have my doubts now too. He actually wrote an open letter about that same priming research he helped make so famous, and he called the whole situation a train wreck. So here's the bottom line. When you run a deeper analysis on all the studies in the book, the best estimate is that the true replicability rate is somewhere between a really dismal 12% and maybe 46% if you're being generous. Just let that sink in.
Even the best case scenario suggests that more than half the findings in the book might not hold up.
So, does this mean you should just toss the book in the bin? No, no, absolutely not. Far from it. But it does mean we need to change how we think about it. We have to look at its legacy now with the benefit of hindsight. The scientist who did this R-index analysis, a guy named Ulrich Schamack, he really nailed it. He said we should read the book not as some objective summary of scientific evidence, but as, and I'm quoting here, a subjective account by an eminent psychologist. It's Kahneman's brilliant take on the world based on the science he had back in 2011. Because look, that central idea, System 1 versus System 2, is still an incredibly useful mental model. It gives you a framework to recognize your own biases, to question your own gut feelings, and to remember to engage that slower, more critical thinking when the stakes are actually high. The value is still there in those big ideas, even if some of the specific evidence has gotten a bit wobbly. And this whole story leaves us with a bigger, more important question, doesn't it? It shows us that science isn't some fixed destination with final answers. It's a process. It moves forward, it corrects itself, even if it's kind of slow and messy. So the real question for all of us is, how do we celebrate these revolutionary ideas while also acknowledging that the scientific ground underneath them is always shifting? That is definitely a question worth thinking about. Slowly, of course.